Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Welcome back to Journalistic Writing. If you remember, in our last class, we were talking about parts of newspaper. And, of course, we discussed the main pages, the inside pages, and, of course, the very important one, editorial page, and different parts of the main page, different parts of the editorial page. We did talk about the supplements also. We did talk about that, these days newspapers are delivered actually in package form, not just the main 7-8 pages, but also some supplements, specialized, writings on different subjects, different events and happenings, different festivals. Plus, magazines are also very much part of it. Then, of course, the lighter part of newspapers, we discussed that there are some fun pages, there are some, guide sections also, and, things of the stuff. Today, I will take you towards the very hardcore, very specialist language, the language actually of newspapers. Well, very frankly speaking, newspapers can be divided into two, main categories actually, or two main types. The first one, tabloids, and the second one, broadsheet. There is another type of newspaper that we call actually middle market papers. Middle market papers means half tabloids, half broadsheets. Let's talk about actually what broadsheet and tabloids actually are all about. By the way, this one word if I use for tabloids and broadsheets, I can say that tabloids are informal papers, and broadsheets are formal papers. From this, we can also say that tabloids, they are, you can say, serious. They project actually, serious. Informal, journalism, and broadsheets, they project, of course, formal and serious, journalism. And of course, the middle market papers, of course, will be somewhere in between, well, it depends, are they 50-50 tabloid, 50 broadsheet, or how they set up actually the proportion, how much informal they will be and how much, formal they are going to be. Well, that depends. These two terms which I'm using for you, tabloids and broadsheets, these are very general, of course, terms, and they mean different things, for different people. But in very general terms, tabloids, which I told you, they are informal, newspapers. They are printed on, A2 size papers, which are folded to, let's say, A3. It means, they are smaller in size compared with the broadsheets, the spread of the broadsheets. Broadsheets are actually printed on A1, size of the paper. And then if you fold them, of course, the size becomes A2. Very commonly speaking, all mass circulation papers, they are tabloids. Also middle market papers. These broadsheet papers, they are called serious newspapers, quality newspapers, and tabloids are called as, gutter or, informal, popular newspapers. Popular means, newspaper which is actually read by the masses, actually. And I use the word, the quality, paper or quality journalism, of course, it's read by, let's say, educated, technical class, of the society. And tabloids are, of course, read by, the masses, the majority, of the people, average people with average understanding, people with average intellect, people, with average literacy or what. By the way, these tabloids, they promote, very frankly speaking, sensation or sensational journalism. And broadsheets, they of course project information, facts, and figures. You find in broadsheet newspapers the representation of facts, the representation of truth, and they always address the intellectual aspects of the readers, whereas tabloids newspapers, of course, they project sensationalism, emotionalism. Over there you find things pretty emotive, and they try to engage their readers emotionally, of course. That's why, if you take a look of tabloids, they are full of interesting stories for the people. They do talk about how people are affected and impacted by, the stories which, of course, they are talking about. Whereas broadsheet newspapers, their intentions are totally different. They want to share information based on facts and figures, full of evidence, and they try to, amplify that information with the help of, different, I would say, sources to authenticate it. Sources like, let's say very formal sources, just to give a voice to, let's say, the government officials, the people from the court, for example, the people from the investigating agencies, the police, blah, blah, blah. So this is how, they sport pieces of their information, pieces of the news with the help of some authentic sources and make, things more objective and very less subjective. Whereas tabloids, total stance is, subjective and very, very less objective. The third, type, which I discussed with you, middle market, papers. Well, of course, they are a mix of formality, mix of informality. They do, give space to sensationalism, but at the same time, they try, to, discuss facts and figures, discuss, very objective reporting and all, with the readers, of course. If I talk about our country, Pakistan, then I would say, forget about the size of the paper. I would say, most of the newspapers, again, forgetting about the size, actually, most of the newspapers, in our country are middle market papers, actually. I mean, a mix of informal and mix of formal journalism, actually. There are one or two papers, which you can call globally standardized in terms of, serious and quality journalism. Of course, probably you are very much, reader of those quality, journalism, which, of course, you can very well understand, the stance, they project compared with, the most, papers which, come into the market. And, of course, their stances also formality and informality, the mix actually goes with them. Coming back to our point, the language of newspapers, I would like to, illustrate and highlight the language of newspapers through 11, points. Let's take a look of those, first of all, those 11 points, which we are going to, keep in our mind while analyzing, language of the newspapers. On your screen, I have enlisted those 11 points. First of all, headlines. We'll compare headlines which make their appearances in tabloids and which make their appearances in broadsheets. Then paragraphing of these two types of newspapers. Then typographical features. Then punctuation, alliterative and rhetorical patterning, sentence structures, coordination, and then adverbials, modifiers, lexes, and last of all, angle. Starting from this headlines, well, in tabloids, what happens with the headline, that most of the headlines, they are typed in, of course, bold prints. And very frankly speaking, the headlines, they spread all across the page, actually. In formal broadsheet, newspapers, the main headline or the main story actually is given not more than 3 column space, actually. And the printing actually is, of course, yes, it's bold, but it does not run across the whole page. Then, if there are some strap lines, or if there are some, sub headlines, they are in tabloids, let's say, underlined at times. They are at times they use colors also, just to let it stand off the rest of the pieces of news. So this is a story all about, headlines. In serious newspapers like broadsheet newspapers, headlines, they are in bold type, but they are never capitalized, actually. In tabloids, all the words are in uppercase. Printing is pretty bold. At times, headlines are underlined, or, to rather illustrate it more, they change the color of the text also. This is how, they make it, more prominent for the readers, to have their, eye catch. Going towards the paragraphing of these two newspapers, it's in tabloids, paragraphs are, of course, small in size, 2 to 3, sentences, whereas in, broadsheet, newspapers, paragraphing, longer paragraphs are there. Sometimes, the whole paragraph consists of just one sentence. When such is a situation, of course, readers, they are supposed to have a lot of, concentration, to understand the whole piece of that, news. At times, when you read tabloids, you feel as if, if there are, let's say, 10 points they want to discuss with you, you find that, in each paragraph, 1 point. So, in other words, the whole story is actually a component of 10 smaller paragraphs. You feel at times that, there is no sense of paragraphing actually going on. The principle, which you've studied about, paragraphing thing, you do not find, applied actually onto the tabloid, paragraphing. Whereas in broadsheet newspapers, you find, paragraphing in which, all the 3, 4, features like unity, coherence, of course, the development also, is very much taken care of. The third point, which is typographical features. This is something, very interesting. Typographical basically is a layout, thing I'm talking about. The first paragraph of tabloids, it's printed in bold type actually. And then the second paragraph is, of course, little less, bold. And the third one, is printed in its regular, size. So it, after headline, and if there are some, sub-headlines also, under it, I'm talking about the first paragraph, which you can call also the lead, of the story. This is in larger printing. Then the second paragraph is in, let's say, semi-large size. And the third one will be, of course, in, regular printing size. Whereas in broadsheet newspapers, such kind of typographical, features, of course, we don't use. Over there, only 3 things, headline, strap lines, or sub-headlines, for example. They, go for the large printing size, whereas the text doesn't matter, first paragraph or second or third or fifth, doesn't matter. They all go in the same standard, text size. So, in broadsheet newspapers, as far as the typographical features concerned, they are pretty controlled actually. Large printing, of course, or large printing size goes towards the main headline, the strap line, the sub-headline. But as far as the text stuff is concerned, of course, we use it, sparingly, this technique. We try to keep our text size, of course, pretty controlled, standard one. Going towards the next important feature of this, newspaper language, that's about punctuation. By the way, in tabloids, or in middle market, newspapers, punctuation is used sparingly. We do not use, commas, for example, when we use, let's say, the strings of adjectives or the adverbials, inside. For example, this sentence that last night, Jim, 42, said he had always feared redundancy. Now, in this sentence, you can see last night, after last night, there should be a comma, but that's omitted actually. After Jim should be a comma, after 42 should be a comma, after said can be a comma, but all these commas, they have been omitted. He had always feared redundancy. Okay, now, students, did you see that we, omit commas in, of course, informal, news reporting, in tabloids, for example. But please keep in mind, not everywhere, we omit it, especially in the strings of adjectives. And, of course, when we use, adverbial, stuff, commas, are, omitted. Another very important point about punctuation in tabloids, that is, if there are some special words, we are using in a news article, for example, or there are, some keywords, for example, which you want to highlight, out of that text. What you do is actually you put commas, which we call as, inverted commas. Whereas in formal, news reporting, for example, in broadsheets, for example, first of all, we use punctuation marks all the way, in standard writing should go. very conventionally, like, we follow the rules of punctuation. We, of course, do not, first of all, omit commas. Number two, we do not try to highlight keywords with the help of inverted commas. Going more towards punctuation thing, like in tabloids, we try to, make our modifiers distinctive by putting, hyphens across. Let's take a look of one example so that, it should be like, highlighted and clear for you. On your screen, you can see there is one small news report. MPs are already looking forward to the intriguing possibility of a tussle between so-and-so. Now, the hyphen starts, the driver of a Ford so-and-so and a man who is chauffeur-driven in his own so-and-so dash. Again, hyphen is there to inherit John Major's, crown. So we, of course, these hyphens are actually, when we use in writing parentheses, for example, I'm talking about brackets. So at the place of brackets, hyphens are introduced to make that very part more prominent. These measures actually, or these, techniques we do not use for formal news reporting. In formal news reporting, of course, reader, there is a proper structure, like, of the news which we follow. And that structure, of course, to tell you about it, inverted pyramid style. Of course, readers of the serious journalism, they know that which one is the most important part and which one is the least important part. And such tips or such techniques usually are avoided actually, that by using hyphens, for example, or highlighting keywords with the help of inverted commas, for example, or omitting simply commas. These things, of course, are avoided in broadsheet, newspapers. Our next point is alliterative, patterning and rhetorical patterning. Now, alliterative patterning means actually, first of all, understand what are alliterative, expressions. Alliterative expressions are in which, let's say there are two words, for example, and the both words, they start from the same key letter. Let's say a word is, sing. I put two words together, sing and song. Now, sing is starting with S, and the second word, song, is also like, taking its start with S. Now, sing and song is an alliterative expression. Other example can be, let's say, sing-song, I told you before. Let's say dilly-dally. Let's say brickbats. Now, if you analyze the brickbat, it actually means, let's say criticism. Both the words, like, they are starting off with the same letter, brick, and of course, the bat. There is one underlined, like, line from a story. Over there, like, you can see secret trysts with a cutie from Carlsberg. Now, here, C for, cutie, and of course, C for Carlsberg. So these, are, of course, alliterative, words. Another example you can see, proof that the poor are poorer. Now, in this sentence, three words are there which are taking their start from the same, letter P as, like, starting off. So this is an example of alliterative expression. Now, these techniques actually we do not use in serious, papers, in broadsheet papers. Over there, of course, we use rhetorical devices actually. If you remember in our lecture, which was on persuasive writing, we talked about different devices which we use to make a tone or make our writing persuasive. Let's say one example is antithesis. Another example is, let's say, parallelism, for example. There can be another example which was, triad, for example. Such words, which can be fit in a group of three, and then, we can use that. So, sort of a sing-song can also be created through rhetorical devices. So, in, broadsheet papers, in broadsheet, writings, actually, we don't go for alliterative stuff. We actually go for rhetorical, stuff. All the rhetorical devices, of course, they are very much open for us. Of course, we can use them. Like one example for you of rhetorical device in which you would, of course, find balanced phrase and antithesis, like out of sight, out of mind is one example, which is of rhetorical patterning. Look, its effect and its impact, of course, will be the same one, like, the one which alliterative expressions, can create. But alliterative expressions, of course, will be more informal. Rhetorical devices, of course, will be considered formal things, So, formality is actually a very big question for, or in front of, our, broadsheet, newspapers. Let's move ahead towards our next, point of the language of newspapers. And there you find sentence structure. Now, in tabloid newspapers, of course, largely speaking, sentences are, simple and compound. This mixture is pretty common. When they are simple and, compound, it means the impact of the sentence impact, the writing impact, of course, it will be flat in a way. Whereas in broadsheet newspapers, you find a mix of simple, compound, and complex, and of course, compound complex sentences also. So this is, pretty common thing. Examples, you can take a look of the one which I have given under, the tabloid section. Of course, this is a simple sentence. And another point towards sentence structures in tabloid is that here a paragraph can have 2 to 3 sentences. Whereas in, what happens in broadsheet newspapers, you find paragraphing, of course, depending upon actually the impact you want to create. Sometimes paragraphs are of only 1 sentence long. Sometimes, of course, they are 3 to 4 sentence long, which is, of course, a standard paragraphing size. One more feature of, sentence structure in tabloids, that word order, like we have studied, different word orders, in a sentence, let's say subject, verb, and object. That's a very typical, sentence structure in English language. But in tabloids, we find variety of structures as far as, like, the word order is concerned. You can find, like, object at start and sentence, subject and verb, like, coming after. Whereas in broadsheet newspapers, we very much strongly follow the same patterns. Subject has to be there, verb and object, and the passives, we use sparingly, actually. An example of this point, which I talked about, that word order is changed, actually, quite often in tabloids to create very different type of emphasis, in our sentences. For example, the sentence over there is, said the TV star, it's true. Now, said the TV star, usually, like, the TV star said it's true. This is how, like, we go for. But said the TV star is called the word order change. So these kind of, like, innovations are pretty common in tabloids. Let's go towards now coordination in the initial positions. In tabloids, coordinations are quite often used at the start of a sentence, whereas in broadsheet newspapers, coherence actually is achieved, with the help of referencing and repetitive lexical chunks. Whereas in tabloids, we find, of course, these coordinating conjunctions and, conjunctive adverbs, for example, pretty lavishly actually used. One more example for you, like sentence is starting from, and Lisa, 23, is hoping for success tomorrow, but now one enterprising business is en route for recovery. See, there are 2 sentences in this piece of news, and both of them are, taking their start from, conjunctions. Like, and in the first sentence, and but in the second sentence. This does not actually happen in, of course, broadsheet, newspapers. You might be wondering then, how they link up their sentences. Well, they, of course, link up the sentences, with the help of these conjunctions. But look, linking sentences is, of course, an art. One is, like, take the example of, your body structure. You do have lots of joints in your body structure, but they're not like, very explicitly, like, present in your body, of course. They are very much there, but implicit feeling is more common. Exactly the same way, conjunctions are very much in serious writing, but they're not that way naked or that way visible, like, you could count in just one single glance that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 conjunctions are very much present in that. So very, intelligently, very cleverly sentences are connected with each other, and the dominance actually is to referencing more for coherence, and repetitive lexical chunks are used, to, of course, enhance the coherence and cohesion, in broadsheet, language of the broadsheet, newspapers. Let's move towards the next point. That is adverbials. In tabloids, of course, adverbials, they are used at the start of sentences to change the focus and keep readers interested. An example for you: instead of walking up the aisle with Susan yesterday, her 28-year-old fiance was banged up in a cell. Now, starting from instead of walking up, so this kind of starts are like, pretty common in tabloids, whereas in broadsheet, newspapers, adverbials are used, but it depends, like, as far as the use at starting is concerned. Well, it depends. If the need is for the adverbial to be used at the start, they of course will use. So it depends upon effect and impact and sort of emphasis you want to give, or you want to create in your writing. So depending upon this, of course, you keep changing the positions of adverbials in your sentences. Whereas in tabloids, adverbials are most of the time used at the start of the sentences. Next one, modifiers. As you know that there are 4 very common modifiers, like adjectives are there, adverbs are there, and then you have appositives, for example, and then, prepositional modifiers. What's the function of, modifiers? Very simply, they add information, They help you make your sentences, let's say, expand in terms of, meanings and all. So, modifiers are used to add, of course, meanings to your nouns, meanings to your, let's say, verbs. If we talk about a sentence structure, subject, verb, and object, then, of course, you will be like, adding adverbs to, modifiers to your subject, to your verb, to your object, to, of course, give more meanings. But we can use, modifiers for some special purpose also. Like in tabloids, modifiers are used to, let's say, bring color in your writing. I mean, and one more important thing, these modifiers, especially, let's say, adjective, for example, they have 2 places. One is, pre-modifier or pre-modifier place and post-modifier place. Pre means, when you use an adjective before a noun, for example. And post will be when you're using adjective after the noun. In tabloids, mostly modifiers are at their pre-modifier places. Every noun has its modifier before itself. So this is how it is used. Whereas in broadsheet newspapers, we use both. We use pre and post modifiers, and the consideration is actually to the very fact that use modifiers not to sensationalize, your news or to color your news. Actually, modifiers are used to enhance facts and figures, enhance meanings, actually, add, of course, more, let's say, evidence or more truth, actually, to your writing. One more important thing, if you come back to the slide, I have over there, given you an example that, in tabloids, modifiers are coined also. Like, example, Wacko Jacko. Now, Wacko Jacko, of course, it's not a standard, way of modifying your stuff, but, it has been coined, for special purpose. Then, Saxpert, for example. This is an example of, coined modifiers. Then, punning is also very common in tabloid newspapers. Punning. Now, what is punning? Punning means, actually, let's say there is one word, and that word, can have, let's say, 2 different meanings. 2 very opposite meanings, for example. And punning, we say, when you use such words humorously, for example. This will be, of course, the use of pun or punning. Now, this is a very common feature in tabloids. Let's say, an example can be say cheese. Now, photographer, he says say cheese, when he takes your picture. But say cheese, we can also mean from this that, go and buy cheese. Right? I have collected some examples for you to understand what punning actually is, which is, of course, a common feature of tabloid also and middle market newspapers, which are very common, in our country, Take a look of some sentences which can highlight what punning actually is. Like the first one is, when you decide to give her a ring, give us a ring. If you see this sentence, the word ring actually has 2 meanings. One ring, of course, which you give, let's say, to your fiance, okay? The one like, can put on. The second ring, of course, is phoning. I mean, if you want to give her a ring, give us a ring. Maybe a jeweler's, like, advertisement, he, like, has giving you advice, like, advice that, you want to give her. So, call us and we can, like, get you the best, bought. Now, second example is go up in the wind. This line I've taken from an advertisement, which was actually hiring air stewards. So go up in the wind, actually, it shows towards, of course, that air steward's profession. And second, of course, is that, you can become famous, of course, if you, join us. Another example is sound advice of punning. A sound advice, sound has two meanings. One, of course, let's say the music system. And second, sound means, good advice. So there is a punning in it. So sound is a word which has two, meanings, and you can humorously, like, you can speak it. Humorously, like, you can use it for double meanings, of course. Another example, for a few pounds, you can lose a few. Now, for a few pounds, you can lose a few. Pounds, of course, like, currency, Second, pound means the weight. If one is, suffering from obesity, for example, he's put on, like, loads of pounds on him, so he can, of course, go to gym over there and then can, like, work out and can reduce his, weight. So pound here, money, plus pound here, weight also. Another example, your views are reflected in the mirror. Now, the mirror, of course, is a newspaper also. And the mirror here is also used, like, we print what you want, actually. One more example, the last one of punning, go by air, it's plain common sense. Go by air, it's plain common sense. Again, like, you can join some, air company, for example, like some, airline you can join, and it's a plain common sense. Now, plain, actually, the word plain means simple also. The word plain actually here means airplane as well. So this is how, like, we use punning in tabloids to make, of course, our, writing more interesting. Whereas in broadsheet newspapers, we, of course, do not, use such tactics. Punning, of course, is avoided. Whereas the story of modifiers in, broadsheet newspapers is totally, the other way around. Here, modifiers, of course, are, used to add more meanings, more ideas, of course, more facts and figures. So the consideration is use modifiers to add accurate details, not color or not sensationalism, very frankly speaking. Let's move now towards our next point, and that is lexes. What types of words are actually used in, tabloids and in broadsheet? Of course, as you know, we talked about once 4 types of, word choices or language choices, that pompous writing, then standard writing, and the third one, colloquialism, and the fourth one, substandard. Now, if we talk about the words, about all the 4 pieces of writing, of course, in tabloids, colloquialism will be very common. You would find at a lot many places in their reporting colloquial expressions, colloquial phrases, colloquial lexical chunks, and also slangs, pretty commonly used. Whereas in broadsheet newspapers, you would find standard writing. They sparingly, use colloquial, words if unavoidable. Otherwise, of course, they resort to the standard form of writing, the standard word choices. Even broadsheet newspapers, they avoid pompous words also. Why they do it? Of course, very simple thing. It is a quality news writing. It is a quality, newspaper. But still, they want to make it for global understanding, actually. For global understanding, of course, word choices or language choices, of course, have to be, let's say, from, easy to not very difficult level. So this is how this, care is actually taken. In tabloids, situation is altogether different. No consideration actually is given to the type of word they're using. You find a mix of all these. You find some substandard entries also confined to a, some central region of, some specific, let's say, country or specific some city. You find colloquial entries also. You find at places standard as well. At places you find, sub-pompous and substandard, going side by side together. So that way, like, tabloid considerations, are given to the word choices. Moving towards our next angle. This point, I would like to, bring you back towards the slide and see actually what angle is. Before I take you towards the slide, please keep in mind, angle means what? Let's say every story can have two aspects. Let's say its brighter aspect or its dark aspect. Now, if you, try to project, let's say, the brighter side of the story, for example. So this is what angle actually you are adopting. Or if you are, your point can be, to highlight the darker side of the story. So this is again your angle actually. So it depends. It depends, of course, upon the reporter or the one like who's covering it. Or maybe the policy of the newspaper for some special issue, for example. Some newspaper like, groups, they may be biased towards like, certain issues or, certain matters, for example. So their angles are at times biased. Objectivity, of course, will be at stake. Subjectivity, of course, will be very much involved in that case. Let's take a look. I would like to read a few lines for you to understand what angle in tabloid and what angle in broadsheet newspapers actually are. The angle adopted is usually human. News stories are directly linked to people and the ways in which they are affected by an event or issue. The tone is conversational and the approach is often sensational and dramatic. Individual ideas are not always developed and the order of points can seem illogical. This is about tabloids. Now let's read about broadsheet, newspapers. The angle adopted tends to be more factual. There is more likely to be evidence of research and a greater concern with accuracy. The tone is often restrained and controlled. Summaries are provided and topic sentences make the approach seem more precise. So this is all about angle thing, which is very important actually. Now, I would like to illustrate all these 11 points which we have just discussed about the language choices actually, which is, of course, in the tabloids and in middle market newspapers and in broadsheet. Now, I would like to show you, one story. It's two versions. One version from a tabloid newspaper and one from a broadsheet newspaper. Story is same. Like there was a 2-year-old child and it was accidentally locked out of course, his own house, and it was temperature outside, of course, was below 0 and got freezed, was taken by, his mom to hospital over their doctors, through some untiring efforts, like saved, of course, that child's, life. Now, that was the whole incident. Let's see how these two newspapers, tabloid and broadsheet, they are covering this. We'll also keep our eye on the language choices. All these things, we'll, of course, consider. We'll take a look of, of course, their headline style. The type of words they're using in headlines. And we'll also see the printing of the headlines. Are they in upper cases or in lower cases? We'll see whether strap lines or underlines are, subheadlines are being used. We'll see points are being underlined. We'll also see, the paragraphing there. Is it, same, printing size, or somewhere some typographical, features are creeped into, for example, the first paragraph in larger prints, second one in semi, and then third, of course, in regular. Then also we'll see the choices, word choices, and the sentence choices also. We'll also see the punctuation especially. And moreover, try to see that this story is trying to convey factual information or it's trying to engage people emotionally. This is going to be our, main analysis of these two, that focus whether the intention of the story is to intellectually engage readers or emotionally. Let's take a look of, these two versions of this story. This story covered by a broadsheet, newspaper. Headline is Girl Frozen Alive on Her Own Doorstep. And just to show you the second also, which is tabloid. Now, this is the look of story covered by a tabloid thing. Here, Ice Block Kid. That's the main headline. And then there is a sub-headline also. Carly, 2, survives 6 hours locked out of home at 22 degrees centigrade. Now, these are two stories which we are going to analyze. Let's first start from the broadsheet newspaper. Here you can see in this story, there is no strap line, there is no sub-headline. Only main headline is there. And that too is very much standard in the sense that, words are very carefully chosen. Factual illustration is given. No emotionalism, no emotive elements are added to this headline, like Girl Frozen Alive on Her Own Doorstep. Simple, factual line. Okay? Now, please keep this one in mind when I compare this one with the tabloid entry. Then you see, if you take a look of all, the typographical features of this, all the paragraphs are in the same font size. I mean, the print is same. And then you can see there are at 3 places, if you can take a look, like line number 15, and then line number 31, and then line number, let's say, 37. Here, evidence actually, or you can say quotes have been given, I mean, the doctor's views about, this happening, how they saved this girl, the lines have been quoted directly. And then as far as the naming of persons concerned, like the parents of this girl, their full-fledged names along with titles are given. I mean, the formality has been taken care of. In the last paragraph, you can see the views of the parents also. How do they, react to this kind of, situation? Their feelings have been given. Now, we'll, of course, speak a lot more about, tabloid entry, because that entry gives us a lot of, actually, points to talk about. First of all, compare, please, its headlines. Over there, very factual was there, and here, Ice Block Kid. It's a noun phrase, of course, ice, noun, block, noun, kid, noun, I. It's not a factual one, of course. It's more of emotional, I mean to say. Then if you see the sub-headline, name of the child is given, Carly. Over there, we found, of course, the girl, and here, name of the child. And then, modifier 2. Age is specially mentioned, actually, so that, people could be emotionally engaged in a way that, such a small child, like, by the carelessness of the parents, left out, locked out of her own home. How come? Survives 6 hours. And now, the length of the time is mentioned, actually. How many hours that child spent outside, locked out of home at 22 degrees. The temperature is also given. So this is how they are trying to sensationalize. Look here. When stories are like this, serious newspapers, they try to tone it down. How they tone it down? Of course, they will remove, they are going to give these facts and figures, but somewhere inside the text, not prominently part of the headline. So who gives this way? Of course, tabloids, where intention is to at once grab readers' attention, okay, and emotionally engage them, right? Now, this is what actually this tabloid, of course, newspaper is doing. Let's now go into the text as well and to analyze it further. Now, you can see the typographical feature. The first paragraph is, of course, it's in larger in size. The bold printing is there. And then the remaining text, of course, is in regular, font size. You can also see the child actually is named in the headline as number 1, kid. And then there is one, tiny. And then, of course, the girl. So this is also sensationalism that, you are not talking about just a girl. You are using words like these, kid. That was not a grown-up girl or what. It was a kid, a tiny child, 2-year-old only. See, this is how they, of course, bring in sensationalism. And then the naming of people is also very different from the serious, reporting. Over there, full-fledged names with proper titles were, and here you can see I have encircled mom, the word actually mother, mom, and father, dad, and then the first names are given. This is in whole of this reporting, you do not find, maybe at one place only, you don't find, any, any information source. Direct quotes are missing. In this broadsheet newspaper, you found at 3 places there were direct quotes by the doctors actually, and this is how they authenticated, this report. In this news, maybe at one point, and that too, indirectly given, no quote, no facts and figures, what doctors were of the view given, and more importantly, no views of the parents given. And words like, if you see the last line of the first column, he failed to spot her. It's a blame shift technique actually. This is what actually emotionalism is, that this reporting is trying to shift the blame onto the carelessness of the parents. If you see the sentence, he failed to, as if he tried and then abandoned the child out of home and went for his work, whereas that was not the case. If you see, there is one quote is given, doctors are amazed the toddler is alive, they say no one and blah blah blah. Here, no name of the doctor who said this is given. So this is how broadsheet reporting and tabloid reportings are totally different. Tabloids are more sensational and broadsheets are more factual actually. I try to illustrate these points with the help of the real examples from tabloid and broadsheet newspapers. I hope you understood this point. Do not forget these 11 points which are the major differences between tabloids language choice and the broadsheets language choice. Of course, for us, the standard, of course, is the broadsheet, which is more serious newspaper, more quality journalism. Of course, the aim, of course, of the quality journalism is to represent truth, of course, factually. With this, take care of yourself. See you next time. Bye-bye.